Alright everybody, so as promised, here's the second part of your Complex Algebra number 2 booklet, talking about factoring techniques and the word problems. So if you're feeling confident in what you're doing and your factoring is good, then you probably won't need this video. But it does supplement this booklet, and I will, we'll go through some of the word problems at the end, give you some clues as to how to proceed on some of those details. Okay, so let's have a look at factoring and do a quick little review of Mr. Gerard's Secret Barbecue Sauce Factory. Just saying. Okay, so in the post-secondary system, we really have, three styles of factoring. We have our GCF, difference of squares, which is kind of like trinomial a little bit, and then we have a regular trinomial. But the trinomial questions, right, these number 2 ones, they can get a lot harder when you have a leading coefficient in front of your x squared. And we did spend a fair amount of time at the beginning of the year, reviewing these details. So I don't want to go through a whole bunch of review, but I'll remind you of the method that I showed the class when we did these questions for the first time way back in September when school started. So, okay, let's cut right to the chase of Mr. Gerard's Secret Barbecue Method. Okay, so in example number 1 over here, on the left, the left side, on the left side, we have to deal with not only the 35, right, the 35 over here, but also the 3x squared. And that requires us to consider both the options at the front and at the back of the trinomial. And so the method that I showed everybody way back in September was to list the possible combinations that multiply to get you those terms. So let's play that out. Okay, so the only way to get 3x squared is 3x times x. And there's 2 ways to get 35. You can go 35 times 1 or 7 times 5. So I just list them. And the more combinations of ways to multiply to get those numbers, I just have to list those possible ones. And then I have to look and see whether I'm going to add or subtract to get my middle number, just like you would with a regular trinomial. And that comes from right there, that symbol right there. If that's a negative sign, it means one of my brackets is going to be positive and one of my brackets is going to be negative. And effectively, the numbers that I get are going to subtract from each other. So you're like, well, 35 minus 1 is an 8, and 7 minus 5 is an 8, and yeah, you're right. But remember that we have to multiply these numbers here by these numbers, right? Because that's what happens in FOIL, and we'll see what happens. So can you see how it plays out? Now remember, I showed you a little chart that I used to keep track of that. So here, I'll illustrate the chart, and then we'll fill in the brackets, see how things work. So this often involves some guessing and checking, and you have to take these terms over here and multiply them by either of these guys, either the 35 and 1 or the 7 times 5. And so down here, right, you can see that the 3x times the 5, right, 3x times 5 gets you 15x, and then x times 7, the other two, right, gets you 7x. So 15x minus 7x, and we're minusing because that guy's a minus, right? One of my brackets is going to be plus, one of them is going to be negative. So we're minusing because of that reason, and 15x minus 7x gets me 8x, which is exactly what I want. So what that does is it tells me the parts of my 2 binomials that I'm going to need to multiply together. Now it's just a matter of plugging in those spots. So let's have a look. Okay, so at the front we have 3x and x. That's the only way to get 3x squared. And in the back I'm going to have to put my 5 and my 7, but I got to be careful, right? When I'm multiplying, I multiply across the bracket. So even though I have 3 times 5 down here, right, 3 times 5, that 3 is going to multiply to the 5 on the other side of the bracket, right? That's how FOIL winds up working. So let's plug those numbers in and then sort out the plus and minuses. Alright, so the 3 gets multiplied by the 5, right? And then the 7 gets multiplied by the x. So I've got the numbers in the right spots. Now the thing is I need to achieve a positive 8x. So that means I need this 15 down here to be positive and that 7 to be negative. So I'm going to have to make that a negative 7 because x times negative 7 will get me that negative 7 down here. And then 3x times positive 5 will give me my plus 15 right there. So then I just have to fill in plus or minuses. So let's do that. Okay, so there's the end of it. Let's go through the example number 2, and I'll try to do it a little quicker. Okay, so for question number 2, or example number 2, I listed the possible ways to get 6x squared, right? So 3x and 2x and 1x and 6x. And then I also listed the possible ways to multiply to get 10. So 10 times 1 and 5 times 2. So I've got like a short list of what my answers could possibly be. All the other parts, all the other possible numbers like 13 and 7 and 9 and stuff like that, I'm not going to use any of them, right? This just gives me a short list from which to guess and check with. Okay, so now I've got to figure out how these guys here multiply with these guys here and then subtract, right? Subtract to get me 7x. We'll worry about the negative 7 later, but I need to be able to get to 7x. So let's see how I can coordinate those in order to make that a 7x. Let's have a look. Here's a little hint. Okay, so 6x times 2 is 12x, and 1x times 5 is 5x. 12x minus 5x, well that's 7x. So I found the numbers that work, right? All the other stuff we don't need anymore, they're off our short list. We have our candidates, and now we got to put them into the right spots so that they can do their job. Alright, so let's see if we can do that. Our front numbers have to be, over here, 6x and 1x, and our end numbers in each bracket have to be a 5 and 2. And remember, when we multiply across the brackets. So the 6 and the 2 will be in opposite brackets. Let's have a look. Alright, so there they are in their brackets. The only thing we're missing is our positive or negative signs. One of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. And here's where we consider whether or not we have ourselves a 7x, right? So whether we get a 7x or a negative 7x. And right now, currently it's set up for positive 7x. But that's not what we need, right? We need a negative 7x. So I got to switch the polarities here. I got to make that a negative 12 and a plus 5. Let's see how that works. Okay, I need a negative 12x, so I go 6x times minus 2, right? 6x times minus 2. And then I need a positive 5x, so 1x times a positive 5, right? Boom, there you go. And so that gets me my negative 7x. And you can FOIL that out if you like. If you do it to both of them if you really want to check to see how that plays out. It might be a good example just to look and see how the dynamics work if you're still not quite 100% sure on that. Now, as always, there are other methods to use. There's like almost every teacher has their own method. And so if you know another method and it works for you, then that's fine. If you have a quadratic solver on your calculator and you know how to use that, fine. I don't really want to test you on solving quadratic equations here necessarily, especially hard ones like the ones you're dealing with in the book. But it's a necessary detail to being able to sort some of these higher end questions out. So here's a brief review of how to do more complex factoring. So after this, we'll have a look at some of the word problems that you might see and give you some clues as to how to proceed.